The conversation that's coming up will also examine infrastructure as strategy, why the next decade's build decision will influence India's global standing for a century ahead. And we have a brilliant lineup of our speakers who will be joining us here on the stage and who will be talking about the topic and take us through great insight, great perspective. Please put your hands together and help us welcome Mr. Ajay Chaudhary, joining us today with a big hand, Padma Bhushan Awardee and Chairperson, Mission Governing Board, National Quantum Mission. We are very, very honored, sir, that you have joined us today. We are truly very, very honored. Moving on and joining us next, we have Mr. Amitabh Nag, CEO, Digital India, Bashini. Very, very warm welcome, sir. Joining us next, we have Mr. Vibhor Jain, Acting CEO and COO, ONDC, with a big hand. Mr. Surendra Bashani, Head, Best Buy India. Very pleased to host you today. Mr. Ashok Chandak, CEO and President, SEMI India, IESA. Very, very pleased to welcome you here. Mr. Nilanchal Mishra, Partner and National Leader, Government Infrastructure, KPMG India. And moderating the session, we have Dr. Rajendra Nambiar, President, NASSCOM. Let's join in our hands together and help me welcome. Digital infrastructure is no longer about connectivity, it's about capability, control, and competitiveness. I'll request our moderator to please take the session forward.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know we started the session a little bit late, but I hope we have this august set of speakers and I had a great panelist with me today. So we're going to take through some of the specific areas that the compere mentioned there in terms of what we should do with the Digital-First Bharat. One of the things when people talk about Digital-First Bharat, you always think of multiple opportunities and lots of possibilities, if you may, right? And then as someone was recently mentioning, assuming that digital has mostly to do with the AI, quantum, and all the modern technologies, you're going to have multiple slivers of the cake, if you may, or the layers of the cake, all the way starting from the bottommost layer, which is maybe power, and then so how do you really? There is a lot of implications on when you look at a Digital-First Bharat. What happens to the power? What happens to the semiconductor? What happens to the chip layer, whether it is semiconductor and so on? Again, on the infrastructure, whether it is data centers, the GPUs. Again, one more layer above would be the foundational models. People are building large language models, small language models. How that's actually being built. Clearly, with some level of reasoning on top of that. Data becomes a particular layer, and then what happens to the data layer, and then what are the implications for that for India, and of course, to shorten the discussion, maybe to the application layer, where I think we sort of excelled over several years, and then we continue to sort of build on that with an exceptional talent that India has got. So one of the things which we thought we should talk about today is that what are we really building from a infrastructure point of view. So what could be the specific areas that we could potentially do? Are we doing this infrastructure building merely to support the requirement of which we need today, or are we really building it for the global leadership and for decades ahead? Oftentimes I think we've been sort of caught a little bit off foot in terms of building everything for today's requirement, be it physical infrastructure or digital infrastructure. So that's something which we need to see. Can we do this better? So again, I mentioned we have this fabulous panel, and then presume that we have another 40 minutes or so for us to sort of have this discussion. We will go with a flow as the compere mentioned earlier on. Starting from sort of building digital institutions. So let me maybe start with my good friend Ajay ji here, who's got phenomenal amount of experience in building institutions, be it commercial or public institutions in some sense. Being part of, Ajay, I think you've done a phenomenal job with the quantum, and we're just having a conversation around what is that we should do from a Q day, as you mentioned, and then what the implications of some of that. So, especially in the era of AI and then the constant flux that we're all living in, Ajay, what do you, in your mind, are the essential ingredients, if you may, for a true digital institution? So when you look at in terms of architecture, in terms of autonomy, capital structure, and some of the things you always worry about, of course, talent and constitutional safeguards. So how do you really see this shaping up, and how do you really, as a country, what should we be doing to build these digital institutions of the future?
Yeah, today I think we are working too much in silos. So semiconductors is one area, AI is another area, quantum is another area. So we are working in many, many silos like this. I think if we want to really seriously work on creating a digital institution, then literally one ministry should look at digital. And that's really what we should be doing, creating a digital ministry or a digital department.
One could argue, Ajay, that MeitY is sort of the proxy for digital ministry.
It is a proxy, but it's still a proxy.
It is.
So I think we need to now look at very seriously how we build it up from chip to app.
All the way to the app, yeah.
And therefore, all the layers that you talk about should be taken care of by one single organization that starts to look at AI, quantum, DPI, and security. All those issues should be taken care of by one institution. And that way, what will happen is that we will not waste resources. Otherwise, there's so much duplication happening. For example, I'll tell you, in quantum alone, there are 5 different ministries working on quantum. And there's huge amount of duplication happening. Same areas everybody is working on. So, this is something that needs to be avoided in a country like ours where we don't have that many resources to waste. So I think that kind of institutional strategy we need to create, that this is our digital strategy from chip to app. And then every layer is taken care of by this institution. And if any other ministry wants to use this, they can put apps on top. But the rest has to be controlled in some manner by a single institution, which is something which is not happening here, but many countries have now started to create digital ministries, including some in the Middle East.
Yeah, UAE was the first one.
Yes.
Dubai had the first digital minister.
So I think this change needs to be brought through if we want to make it sustainable.
Absolutely. And so your idea of having all the common ones under one ministry, sort of focused on building that, and then bifurcate into whatever the individual ministry.
See, originally, if you look at it, 3 years ago, there was a single minister for Telecom and MeitY. Now, Telecom got separated. Telecom is a very important part of the whole situation. Without Telecom, nothing can last.
Right.
Telecom is the base. So, chip is the one base, Telecom is another base.
Connectivity. I would probably take it more than telecom, more connectivity, I would say. Yeah. Now, let me come to Vibhor. I think, Vibhor, you've done a phenomenal job with ONDC. I know that there could be, the jury is still out there in terms of where ONDC is really heading. But it is a very important piece of the DPI architecture, DPI, outside of maybe, I would say, the identity layer and maybe the payments layer. You're kind of in the periphery of things. Give us a sense of why, if I may sort of paraphrase, right? I mean, I believe that ONDC hasn't taken off as much as it should have been, and you might have a different opinion, and that's okay too. But tell me why it didn't take off the way it should have, and what do you think should happen in the next, several years, if you may, in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the broader ecosystem that we need to build, so that ONDC can really take off, or apps like ONDC or organizations like ONDC can truly have a good trajectory as we move forward.
No, thanks. So let me, first of all, thanks for having me here. I think if I look at the problem that we're trying to solve for, is to say, how do we solve for not only just digital rails, which help improve the operational efficiency. That operational efficiency could be with respect to commercial operational efficiency. It could be with respect to unit economics across value chains. At the same time, what you're looking at is the complexity that comes along with it in terms of movement of goods, right? So if I look at initiatives like some of the other DPIs we spoke about in terms of identity, in terms of payments, these are all digital products, right? And these are single products. The moment you start looking at commerce or logistics as a use case, here you're talking about physical movement of goods and services, right? Now that's where the complexity comes in terms of the gestation period that you need to sort of, really have any of these initiatives take off from a meaningful manner. Now, where does the larger complexity come in terms of the structural trust that's required in enabling that to happen? The critical parameter that comes in when we talk about movement of physical goods is the quality of service assurance, right? If you order a product on any e-commerce platform as an example, the quality of service that you receive it on time, the right product with the right quantity, there are multiple parameters that come along with it. And that's where the complexity comes in. Add to it the entire logistics layer that comes to it. So obviously those are pieces which need to be looked into from a larger initiative perspective, and in terms of what or how much time would any initiative take, sort of really hit a tipping point from where it really takes off. Building on some of these pieces around quality of service that I spoke about, the question is, how do you build that trust, right? And especially when you're talking about, on one side, mature D2C brands. On the other side, you're talking about the weavers and the artisans from, tier 2, tier 3 sort of, remote areas in the country. How do you build that trust becomes a critical component in this entire infrastructure. I think taking a step back in terms of the long-term view of how these institutions need to establish themselves. One is, how do you build neutrality to make sure that these are DPIs that are there for long? These are DPIs which are building trust from an independence perspective. These are DPIs which are building trust from a neutrality perspective. I think those are the larger questions to be answered.
But the question is, why it didn't take off, or what was the issue with ONDC? Where all of that, what you said is correct, but which one didn't work?
I think to me, the largest point is the quality of service assurance, right?
Why are we not able to do the quality of service?
Given the diversity of and the complexity of this entire ecosystem, especially when you're moving physical goods, right? Reliability of logistics, reliability of packaging. Let's understand the hygiene factors required, right? The moment you're talking to a small weaver or an artisan in a remote village, how do they package products? How do they label products? How do they warehouse the products? How do they manage the inventory? How do they manage the cataloging? How do they ship the products?
What should we do differently, What should we do differently?
So I think the larger point that comes in terms of how you should look at it differently is, how do we have institutional structures operating at state level, which can handhold these sort of, marginalized segments to scale up to a level where they're digital ready, right? How do I bring it?
Very important for a future,
for a national scale up to happen.
Agreed.
Because unless you are assisting those sort of, segments with such support, which has such handholding, their adoption of digital rails is going to be very, very tough. Especially when there is physical products involved.
No, I think a related topic again, I want to bring in Surendra from Best Buy, and I think you have a different profile, Surendra, compared to the rest of your panelists right here, but you come from very commercial, I presume this is on the GCC and what you do and so on. But, from a global enterprise perspective, what gives confidence that India's digital ecosystem is stable enough to embed, global supply chains? And how do you look at some of these, the supply chain ecosystem which is existing? And, what is that we should be building for the future?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. One is definitely, what gives confidence is we're on the right track. There is political commitment, there's institutional commitment, and we're making progress in the right direction, and that's very heartening. The second is we've shown that we can build digital public infrastructure at scale, with UPI, with Aadhaar, a lot of stuff that we've done, we can show that we can deliver, but there's more work to be done. I think when it comes to supply chains, or in general, a lot of the time, what has sometimes happens is we've built a thin digital layer over actually a manual process. So the digital layer is, you have a website where you can go and start your process, upload documents, do things. But then behind the scenes, there are a huge number of humans that are moving your file to the next point and the next point and next point. So we need to be careful about that. The second part of that is there's still work that needs to be done where we are essentially exposing the complexity and essentially exposing our org structure to, the customers, which are, again, global enterprises, where you have to jump between portals. You have to go from a state portal to a local portal to a, central portal. There's different departments, there's different organizations that are involved, where for global enterprises, it's not a seamless single window. You have to get something done. You just go to one place and get it done. You have to jump across all of these different things. I think there's a lot of inefficiencies, but I think what gives confidence is, there is a lot of energy and commitment towards making sure we're building this correctly. And we're moving way faster than a lot of other people across the world, a lot of other governments across the world are. And we're thinking about it the right way. I think we just need to make the next step, and we need to make it with a sense of urgency.
Yep, I agree. And we talked about multiple layers, and one of the things apart from supply chain is also the compute, the ability for us to have compute, and compute is power in today's world. And then, it could comprise of multiple things. Geopolitics plays a much bigger role. And Amitabh, I'm going to come to you and ask you something about your idea of sovereignty. But let me phrase it a little bit more concretely for you. Of course, you come from a Bhashani angle or a lens, if you may. But when you really see sovereignty is got multiple definitions. Depending on whom you ask, they'll say this is what sovereign technology means and sovereignty means and so on. So in your area, especially now that we're talking about quantum, certainly AI, it's no longer territorial, right? It's computational. Is sovereignty about owning chips or the dominance over the semiconductor layer, over GPU, controlling standards, if you may, or security, securing data, ensuring strategic access to compute? So what is the hierarchy of priority for India? And you've seen it a little bit from the Bhashani angle, if you may, but what do you think when you look at the future, what should be the sovereign agenda for India, especially given that we are talking about Digital-First Bharat?
See, when you're looking at future and looking at sovereignty, future is all about knowledge, and knowledge is going to be the bedrock of AI, because AI would learn out of knowledge. So fundamentally, our idea of sovereignty should be looking at how do we actually have this sovereign knowledge imbibed into all our systems, with respect to app layer is the most important layer in that aspect, because when you look at the AI coming in and the other technologies coming in, you would definitely like our systems to be behaving our way, the way we would like perhaps our child to behave, right? That's the way we would like our values to be construed. Having said that, it is not a possibility to achieve that without looking at the lower layers, because you often would perhaps look at the models, AI models which are there. Obviously, they need to be trained. The data needs to be sovereign. The chips needs to be sovereign, because you need to actually see that those are behaving in the way we are looking at. There is no malware or anything which.
But I can't think of a country other than China, of course the US. Who else can get closer to the sovereignty the way you're describing? I mean, does India have any chance of getting sovereign at all?
Obviously, we have adopted a policy of using best of both worlds rather than trying to be all aligned to one thing. But we should have certain systems which are obviously demarcated towards complete end-to-end,
And what would that be, like critical systems, defense?
Critical systems, designs, knowledge, models, those are which are the basic things based on which the things are actually going to progress. Our experience with, even simple thing like simple in the sense that what we do is simply, language is a very simple thing for us because it comes naturally when you are young. Even simple things like, talking about uncle versus nana versus chacha, it's a kind of, there is a debate of sovereignty starts from there, right? Because you are, it starts saying that, what is that you want to have? So that is where we should be looking at.
Okay, so and one of the things about sovereignty is also that we talked about semiconductor, and I want to switch the gears a little bit and ask Ashok, who's IESA is a very plays a big role in what we do with semiconductor. It's also very not only just capital intensive, Ashok. It's also, as you know, geopolitically very sensitive topic in general. We've been trying to make a big inroad into the semiconductor area, and the time will tell as to whether it was the right decision or how far we could go. Should we pursue end-to-end capability, or should we be doing a few things here and there? For example, Micron did a lot of investments in India. So what is your idea of semiconductor sovereignty, if you may? Or, for that matter, what should India be doing in the semiconductor space? Or we have already lost the battle, we should just, keep quiet and not do much in semiconductor. What's your idea, Ashok?
So first thing, everybody should remove from the mind that we have lost the battle.
We haven't?
We haven't
Are you
lost
sure?
the battle. That's clear.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
It is not about the, first thing I want to tell, that it is not about the technology race. The moment we look at semiconductor sector as a technology race, we think we lost the battle. It is not about technology race, it's much beyond that. Now the point
What is it?
I will explain. I'll give you an example. Very live example. Look at 2 decades ago, Japan had almost like 40% market share of the semiconductors in the logic chips. Today they are 10%. Many people keep saying Japan lost in semiconductors. Let's drill down in detail. Without Japan, nothing will work in the world. Entire supply chain, the chemicals, the materials, the photoresist, the cutting machines, everything is Japan. And in some cases, there is a market share of 70% and 100%. It is not lost. No country will become self-sufficient, and this is where we need to open our eyes. And many times when I go out also, people start asking, how can we become self-reliant and self-sufficient? No need. We need to build our capabilities in a specific domains and areas and build our strategic partnerships with various other countries. This is a fully global ecosystem on semiconductors. It is, as you said, geopolitically sensitive. Yes, it has become geopolitically sensitive of late, recently, because of various reasons which we all know. But it is more of a complete ecosystem which is spread across worldwide. Now look at what India could do actually. So we discussed about just now Ajay ji also touched upon this topic, and I was talking to him before this starting of this program, is, we have a huge talent pool of the design engineers. And everybody knows about it. We made one report which says 20% of the chip design talent resides in India, and maybe it's more also, it's growing. But those design pools are doing today designs for the global multinationals, most of the cases. So it was a design outsourcing in past, which became a GCC in operation, but that strength exists. The point is, how do we leverage this strength to build products out of India actually? And this is the next big thing which if we have to look at Viksit Bharat, we have to look at our strength, leverage that strength which exists. Yes, design pool is there. People are doing 2, 3 nanometer, 180 nanometer and whatever, entire spectrum complete from design to verification to the testing. Entire knowledge pool exists. How do we leverage and build that into a product creation? And that is one important thing from a sovereignty perspective.
Do you think we'll build it for India, or do you think we'll be in a stage to build it for the world?
We have to build for the world. The India gives us the advantage.
What time frame are we talking about, Ashok?
I'm looking at next 5 to 10 years is a good time frame for us to build into this direction. The advantage we have is this pool, but in addition, a use case for India. I mean, there are so many use cases and applications which can be defined for India.
Give me an example of a use case which we can do.
Look at the digital infrastructure we are looking at, the payment infrastructure we are looking at, which is already scaled up. The end products, consumer products, which we are looking at actually. Everywhere, there's a use case in India we can define, we can check. It's a lab. It's a big learning and testing lab in the country. Even AI, we were discussing about the language just now.
Right.
It's an AI model you build up. This will be then use case. You can deploy anywhere in the world. So we have to build from that direction. That is point number one. Second thing is, as you were asking specifically,
right,
where do we focus? So this is one area which we need to build and we need to focus. Number two, we can continue building our OSATs and ATMPs kind of a thing, because this is the easiest thing to do compared to the high-cost bleeding edge foundries. And so we build that, it builds the confidence, it builds the ecosystem, it starts moving us into the right direction. And third one, which is equally important, is finally the fabs and the foundries, which many times people keep saying, oh, we are far behind loss rates because we don't do 2, 3 nanometer, not required. We have one Tata fab coming up, which everybody is aware, and they are investing almost $8 to $10 billion going from 28 nanometer and above. And people say, why 28 nanometer? Please understand, largest volume running semiconductor consumption in the world is 28 and above. And it is also strategically for a country like India, in our defense sector, in our automotive sector, in our telecom sector, and you continue. So what is wrong in that? Why should we chase? And that's why I said, we should not be running about the technology race of 2 or 3 nanometer, but we should look at what we can crack quickly. And I'll give you last example, give me just 1 minute. And this is very relevant again. As I just mentioned, Japan was losing the market share. And their technologies remain like 28 and all those things. Suddenly, out of blue somewhere, there is a company formed called Rapidus. And there is a government funding into that. And there are several other companies funding into that. And they are building 2 and 3 nanometer fab. And it is expected to be highly successful. They got the technology, obviously, from IBM, which is very closely working with them. I was in Japan just a couple of months ago for Semicon Japan event. I met also some people I had around. So, you build 28 and going to 2 nanometer will not be a major issue. Yes, it's difficult. Jumping a node, it's not a design. Design you can move very quickly. Manufacturing is different. But there is an example which is there actually.
So there is hope, that's what you're telling me, right?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Now, you talked about external dependency. Maybe I'll come to Nilachal now. From your KPMG hat, Nilachal, so when you look at, as India, we build AI for Bharat, and, we talked about multilingual capability, population scale, everything is going to be scale in India. So can India shape an alternative AI governance paradigm? In a sense, can we be doing this, in some sense, sovereignty conversation, but how do you make sure that the external dependencies are reduced overall?
So I think the most important thing, if you look at it, what AI is shaping is what we need to work is on the talent itself. So I think we all have been talking about that we have a young talent pool, and by 2050 we'll have almost 1.1 billion working population. Now look at it, it's also a challenge for us. It's also a big challenge for us because when you have a large talent pool coming in, which is a younger population, and AI to be implemented, you need to reskill them in such a way that they are actually being used in the AI paradigm itself. So I'm just saying, while we're looking at everything, we need to first focus on our talent pool, how they can be reskilling and using the AI first itself. That's, I think, one of the major criteria. Second is...
before you go to the second one, what do you think we should do to make sure that our talent is transforming or transitioning?
Yeah. So I think one of the things which we need to look at it, and I think that's the government is currently focusing on manufacturing. Now, if we build on currently into the manufacturing focus, many of the focus will go into that supply chain there. So we need to start focusing on that. What we are saying here is the entry level right now with the AI coming in, the reskilling has to be done somewhere into the supply chain itself. That's where the number one point I was just trying to say. If the government can focus around that, and it's rightly doing it with different policies which is coming in. The second point on the overall AI sovereignty and how do we try and do that. 2 or 3 things I just wanted to, and I think picking up from the discussion which we've been having. One is we need to also get our AI Act, which we don't have it right now. EU has come out with its own AI Act there. So can we have our AI Act? There is obviously a framework and guideline which the ministry has released, but we need to clearly...
But why is it important, though, AI Act?
So the Act actually gives you the regulation rules under the framework under which it needs to be governed there. So,
well, one could argue that DPDP is closer to that in some sense.
So that's DPDP has also come in. That's another fact of it. But overall framework, when you have to give the governance framework, maybe you would need one AI Act there. Second, because your AI and the IT Act was the year 2000 when the IT Act was actually built up there. So the systems which you are looking at right now with the AI and emerging technologies and a lot of work which has been done under UPI ONDC, Bhashini, amazing work which has been done with the emerging technologies. You need to update that as we go ahead. So one of the factors here is, can we look at the regulation and governance in order to get it implemented, and maybe look at other countries, how the regulations, not only I'm just saying look at any other country, but which will fit into our country as an act and regulation.
Thank you, Nilachal. I appreciate that. But I want to tell you one more thing, right? While I know that you're asking for a lot of regulations and acts and so on, most times I think industries flourish when the government is looking the other way, right? I mean, when you look at our own industry, I mean, I'm looking at Ajay ji here because of the fact that, when this whole industry began and, we were talking about Y2K and so on, one of the reasons why truly the software services industry, HCL is part of it, TCS, Infosys, Wipro, and the likes, all flourished because the government actually did not understand what the heck was going on, and then they really didn't have a capability or the infrastructure to regulate this industry in some sense. So, but one thing which you mentioned, which is also very critical, when you look at the future, when you look at digital-first Bharat, if you may, or Viksit Bharat, the one thing which we should not forget is the countries have become really, really successful because the R&D within the country has been at a certain level. Now, we have talked about in multiple forums in terms of why, as a nation, it is not just the government, also the private sector. India's spend on R&D is roughly 0.6, 0.7, and I want to ask this to Ajay ji eventually as to why a developed nation, if you may, when you look at the US or Europe, it's not all of Europe, but some specific countries within Europe, this percentage could go up all the way to 2.5 to 2.7% of the GDP, which is actually goes into R&D. So, Ajay, you've been working on making lots of inroads into getting organizations, whether it is part of the mission, which is specifically quantum mission and so on, and then sort of losing the purse strings of the government to sort of spend more. They'll always come and say, oh, we're going to do 10,000 crores on this mission, another 25,000 crores on some other mission, but eventually it does not seem to trickle down, and there is no matching provision from the industry as well. So how do we solve this? I know that it's not an easy task and we can't solve it in this panel, but what are your thoughts? I know that you've been working on some of this, but give us some sense of both R&D and then eventually these missions being successful.
Well, actually, you've hit the nail on the head, because the critical aspect that's missing in this country is R&D, right, and especially in private sector. All the money that's been spent on R&D till now has been in the government sector. Correct. And you know what the kind of delivery that happens in most of those cases. Now, let's look at why we don't invest in R&D. The reason why we don't invest in R&D, because our thinking has been, as a country has been a trading country. We go to China, pick up a product, put a logo on it and sell it with 5% and 7% margin, which is really what we are doing today as a country. And because literally we are looking at P&L and balance sheet every quarter. Now we need to look long term. And if we don't look long term, we are not going to take the same strides that Korea and Taiwan and Japan took and China took to grow out of this middle income trap. Currently, we're sitting at $2,600 per person GDP. Now, if we continue not to spend on R&D, we'll be stuck here. So we need to now move beyond services. Services has played a phenomenal role for making country happen. Today, if software services didn't exist, this country would be in serious doldrums. You know that and I know that. But we now need to take a view that we need to move from services to products. And that is where R&D is required. And unless we spend money on designing products, then only can we actually be successful. So there are two pieces of that. One is R&D, and the second is market access. So let me take R&D first. The good news is that with a lot of efforts that were made from the industry and some of us working together, government announced a 1 lakh crore R&D fund. This R&D fund is the first time in history of this country where government is going to put money into private sector. They are not going to put money into the government sector. They're going to put in the private sector. And 1 lakh crore has been provided by the Prime Minister for 50 years interest-free. So many institutions have been now set up to deliver this. And the delivery is starting this month. So the good news is that 20,000 crores was allocated for this financial year, which they could not use. But next year, the budget has been provided for another 20,000 crores. So the money is going to be available. The methodology that they're using is that they are going after sunrise sectors, and the top sectors like AI, semiconductors, quantum, biotechnology, all these sectors will be actually funded. So there is a 10,000 crore fund of funds for deep tech startups, which will be delivered through VCs. Then there are three institutions that have been set up: the Technology Development Board, BIRAC, and DST directly. All these three will actually deliver money to private sector for R&D. So if you have a solution at TRL level 2 or TRL level 3 and you want to do translation research, the government will put in 50% of the money. So let us say you have a project
and
of...
the rest 50 comes from the...
Less you have to put yourself.
The company, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's say you're a corporate and you want to do a product or a project for 500 crores. The government will put 250 crores. At what rate? 15 years, 3% interest rate. So it's really nothing. So this is the kind of initiative that the government has now taken. Now it depends how the private sector picks it up. And that is where the biggest challenge will be. Because we are not used to doing R&D. But if the government is saying, I'm going to reduce your risk by 50%, then you better step up as a country. Otherwise, we are going to be stuck.
I want you to wear your HCL hat for a second. I know that you don't wear that often. Then, when you look at, again, going back to the software development, the erstwhile software services and so on, they were able to get by without doing much R&D and still very profitable and then still very successful and so on. So what would be the incentive for the private sector to sort of truly say that, well, it worked in one place, may not work in other places, may not work in AI, may not work in quantum, may not work in semiconductors. So you really have to put your money where your mouth is. And then how do we make sure that we nudge the private sector to match up that 50% with the government? What is that we could do?
Two things. One most important thing is market access. So if, let's say, if a corporate develops a product in India, designed in India, made in India, manufactured in India, owned in India. See, there's a new concept that's emerged in Ministry of Defense where they're talking about owned in India instead of made in India. So this whole concept of owning the technology and the sovereignty part that we were talking about is going to be the role that will be played now. So if it is owned by India, then what should be done by the government to actually scale this business? And the only way to scale this business, to my mind, is exactly what the United States did with DARPA, where they gave a challenge to a company. You said, make this product, and then they filled them up with orders from the government. That market access part is totally missing in India. Right. Some states have taken some recent initiatives here. Tamil Nadu has come up with a deep tech policy where they're saying 5 of the ministries of the Tamil Nadu government will give orders to startups who do deep tech work.
Correct. Yeah. No, I think that's very well said. Now, I know that we're going to run out of time, but I want to get all of your views on one or two things. Let's start with, I want to say, if we were to make bets for the future, I mean, assuming that the whole digital-first Bharat is our goal, Viksit Bharat is our goal. Where do you think we should put our monies? I mean, of course, if you ask Ajay, he's talked about R&D, but let me start with you, Nilachal, and then we'll go this way. And you tell me, I know you two spoke about talent and so on. So, if you were to put your bets on, and then if you're the betting kind of a guy, where are you going to put your bet on? I mean, is it going to be on semiconductor? Is it going to be on AI? Is it going to be on applications? Or is it going to be on some, I mean, one could say that all of the above, that may be the right answer. But I want you to choose one aspect of this whole stack or one aspect of this whole future and say that this is where I think we should be spending most of our energy. And as a nation, we should be betting on this part of the puzzle, if you may, as a priority. So let's start with you and see if we can go around. Yeah.
So I think it's a very difficult question to choose any one of them.
But you should choose one. That's
yeah.
right.
So
my job is to ask all the difficult questions.
Okay.
So that I don't have to answer that. Yeah.
Again, so if I want to choose one factor,
yes.
I've already said talent.
Yes.
But the second factor, if I would like to choose,
you can't have two. You can have only one.
Is India needs to start focusing on manufacturing. Manufacturing is the important factor, and
why though? Why do you say manufacturing
So because many of the factors, what is linked when you say AI, when you say semiconductor, when you say many things, they're all related to manufacturing itself. Semiconductor manufacturing.
In some sense, yes.
So everything is related to manufacturing.
Do you think we can compete with China in manufacturing?
We should. I think somewhere we are far behind right now.
Of course.
And this is the time for us to build up
Well, thank you.
our
Manufacturing.
manufacturing.
Ashok da. What do you think? Of course, semiconductor.
Let me reword now. See, point is, there are two elements actually overall here, design and manufacturing. Manufacturing is a visible thing. So it's visible, your product, and you can see, you can get look and feel, and you manufacture. The design is invisible, but the toughest job. You can buy equipments, machines, set up plants and other thing, and ready to go with manufacturing design. No, not that way. It's the toughest job. And we do it well. I just explained before, we have a good strength in design, and what we need to do in my bit is the same what I said. We have to move this design towards the product creation.
Right.
That is the strong bet we need to do. That is where the economic value is. The manufacturing, your value addition may be 5%, 7%, 8%. The design element you control, the IP you control, your gross margins are 30%, 60%, 70%.
Makes sense.
There are many chip companies, they make 60 to 70% gross margins, not less. And if you do the design well and get the products out, considering what India or globally people would need, you automatically get a good entry ticket to manufacturing. So to me, it's a design-led manufacturing.
And what is this? Is there one specific thing that you could do as a country to get superiority in design?
We need to really get this product creation concept moving. This has been discussed multiple times, and including ministry, we make recommendation. But the industry and government and institute, these three guys, I have myself done multiple meetings. We need to move these three all together so that we get into the product creation actually.
Okay.
And that product creation need is understood, but it's not moving. And Ajay sir already mentioned that our concept of outsourcing or trading, that is the biggest bottleneck right now, actually.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Vibhor, what do you think?
I think if we can focus on digital public infrastructure around cross-border trade, I think simplification of processes out there, simplification of logistics, I think that would be a significant, removal of barriers.
So cross-border trade is what you're thinking in
Yes.
DPI?
Yes.
Huh?
I think, again, the way I'm looking at it is with the realignment of global supply chains, right? How do we make it easy for Indian companies, Indian MSMEs to export stuff globally, right? Today, there is a lot of friction there in terms of logistics, in terms of paperwork. If we can really simplify that and bring down those costs, it would be a huge advantage point.
Wasn't there a logistic-related DPI which was begin to sort of show some?
ULIP, yes,
Yeah.
ULIP was there, but I think more I'm talking about here is cross-border, not within the country.
Got
so
it.
the focus out there was how do we bring down the logistics costs in the country. This is more cross-border.
Yeah, great, thank you. I'm going to skip Ajay ji for a second. I'm going to come back to you. But Amitabh, what do you think?
See, what Ajay ji talked about as market access is one of the factors where we need to invest on people who are developing products to co-create with the market, co-create with the customer.
Yeah.
And that is a portion which will actually give market-ready products. And that's place where we as a customer are, quite okay to buy something which is already developed. We are not, as a customer, investing on creating the product with the creator. And this is something which happens worldwide, that pharma companies actually invest on R&D and co-create the product with the other people. The defense, the example is there, that defense organization invest and do that. It is started happening in defense and space in India, but it has to happen more in other sectors also, where people who are using it should actually become a partner to the co-creation of the product which is there. So in some way, that bridge has to be built up so that we are in a position to build products which are ready for the market, which are having those edge use cases for the product well defined. Otherwise, they will fail in the market.
Thank you, Amitabh. Surendra?
Yeah, I think we need to lean in areas where our advantages and network effects compound, geopolitically. And I think our biggest strength is our talent. We need to find opportunities to unleash our talent. We have a huge amount of human capital. I mean, not just in terms of numbers, but also kind of the caliber of our talent. How do we kind of unleash that? If we do that, everything else compounds. And I know you said one, but I think the other one is I think also energy, like energy generation, storage, and distribution. Like everything you think, not just now, but even in the future, is going to require a huge amount of energy. We already have a shortage of energy even now. But if you think about AI, you think about quantum computing, you think about electric vehicles, like all of those are going to need, huge scale of energy, and we're still hugely.
And Surendra, are you specifically talking about renewable energy or any
everything? We got to look at everything: nuclear fusion, renewable energy, conventional energy, everything. Like we have huge energy dependence. Geopolitically, that is a weakness,
yes.
And that is one thing that can hold us back, even just kind of in our ability to unleash all the things that we could potentially do with all of the technologies that are here or even yet to come.
Good. I want to come back to Ajay and ask the same question, but then with a little bit of more, one thing that we want to really focus on, Ajay, but also in terms of saying that why is that going to make us Viksit Bharat, right? I know technology is going to play a big role in us becoming a Viksit Bharat. Technology is going to play a role in any GDP growth, not just for India, for any country. So in your mind, if you want to pick one or two of these and say, we want to double down on, and you already spoke about R&D, but what are the things that we could do and some very practical ideas for us to sort of take away and truly make it work?
I'll say it in one sentence: be a product nation. And in product nation, I think what we should do is choose 10 products. Could be one semiconductor product, one system product, one nuclear product, SMR or MMR, whatever. And choose 10 products. Become the best in those 10 products. And then from those 10 products, create a global beating products, at least 2 or 3, which are top 5 in the world. That should be our dream. We should not think small. And if we focus on creating these 10 products, out of them, definitely 3 to 4 will become world beaters. Just the way DPI has become a world beater, we can create more products.
But how much time do you think to create this 10 product? We're talking about 5 years, 10 years?
Between 5 to 10 years, nothing more than that. Because it is possible to do so. We have the design capability, Ashok said rightly. Everything is around design, not around manufacturing. If we do the design right, manufacturing will follow.
But Ajay, I think somebody could argue with you saying that as a nation, we didn't have the DNA to build products. If it is, then we could have built any. Take software, for example. We've somehow never been able to we're very service mindset. We've never really built a product. What will change that from the service mindset to a product mindset?
Sir, in 1976, HCL started as a product company. We built India's first PC.
Yes.
We forgot about that business. Reason for it, that there was zero government support. And as a result of that, the whole electronics and telecom industry died. Now the government is very different. Government is very positive about supporting products. And I think very clearly the government should move towards selecting 10 top products for the world. And as a country, we must go after it. Different companies must pick up 1 or 2 products and make them happen, make them for India. And in that, the market access point is very critical. Government must be the anchor customer. So make sure that the government becomes an anchor customer, helps it scale, and then go global. We should not think just India.
Perfect. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring it to a closure. Lots of good ideas. I think all of you mentioned talent, open institutions, digital institutions not being in silos, talked about compute capability and then design capabilities in terms of how the broader semiconductor has to be built. We talked about supply chain and why it is such a critical component of why we need to build the digital-first nation, if you may. Look, great conversation. I know would have loved to have questions from the audience. I presume we don't have too much time for us to do that. But with that, we have this beautiful, very powerful panel that we had. We had too many of them in the panel, so we couldn't really have lots of audience questions at this point in time. But I want to thank all of you. Let's give a big round of applause for the beautiful panel that we had today. But thank you so much.